I used to believe I had it all, a devoted wife, a smart and kind-hearted son, and a quiet home filled with love and purpose. People often told me I was a lucky man. I believed them. For 3 decades I lived in the comfort of a lie so convincing even my instincts were silenced by it. My name is Thomas Aldridge. I'm 68 years old, recently diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. I never smoked a day in my life. Irony, right? The doctors say I have 6 months if I'm lucky. But nothing, not even death, prepared me for the moment I found out the boy I raised, the boy I loved more than my own life, was never mine. It began with something so small, an insurance mix-up during one of my checkups. My son Ethan had listed me as an emergency contact on his hospital file. A blood work inconsistency came up when he donated for a bone marrow screening, and I was asked to come in for comparison. No big deal, I thought. Just a formality. Until the nurse returned, brows furrowed. "We're not seeing any paternal markers between you and Ethan," she said gently, like speaking too loud might shatter me. I laughed. Actually laughed. "That can't be right," I told her. "Maybe the lab made a mistake." But the lab didn't make mistakes. The follow-up test confirmed its zero biological connection. Ethan was not my son. I left the hospital in a daze, clutching a paper I couldn't bear to read again. The ride home felt like driving through someone else's dream. When I walked through the door, Evelyn, my wife of 35 years, was folding laundry on the couch. She looked up and smiled. "Everything okay at the clinic?" she asked. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But I couldn't. Not yet. The words died in my throat, suffocated by shock. I sat down, trembling. "I need to ask you something," I said finally. "And I need you to tell me the truth." She blinked, her hands frozen mid-fold. Is he really my son?" She didn't speak, not immediately. Instead, she looked away. And in that moment, the silence screamed louder than any confession could have. Something inside me broke. 30 years of memories. Ethan's first steps, the camping trips, the bedtime stories, the college move-in day, all began to twist into something unfamiliar, like looking at a painting you once adored and realizing it was a forgery the entire time. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the kitchen table rereading the lab results in the dark, the paper trembling in my hands. And for the first time since my diagnosis, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid I'd never truly lived. The next morning, I couldn't look her in the eye. Evelyn moved around the house like nothing had happened. Scrambling eggs, pouring orange juice, humming the same morning tune she had for years. The air between us was thick like fog in a locked room. But I wasn't going to let it slide this time. "I'm going to get a DNA test," I said quietly, not looking up from my untouched breakfast. She froze, spatula midair. "Thomas, don't tell me I'm being dramatic. Don't tell me I'm confused." I turned to her, voice low but steady. "Tell me the truth. Did you have an affair?" Silence. Then just once she whispered. It was only once. I felt the room tilt. My breath turned to glass. She sat down across from me, hands folded in her lap like a child being scolded. "I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for it to last. It was before we were married." "Ethan is 30, I snapped. "We were married 33 years ago." She looked away. "It was during a rough patch. He was someone I used to know. A mistake. I thought it didn't mean anything." "But it did," I said. "It meant everything." The test results arrived a week later. I didn't open them in front of her. I waited until midnight alone in the study and slit the envelope with trembling fingers. Probability of paternity? 0.00%. It was final, scientific, cold. I was not Ethan's biological father. I sat in that chair for hours staring at the result, thinking of the time I held Ethan's hand during his first vaccination. The birthday cards I wrote, the arguments we had over curfews, the quiet pride in my chest the day he graduated with honors. Was all of it a lie? No, I had been real. I had loved him. But now I couldn't escape the feeling that everything he was, his face, his blood, his name had come from someone else, and I'd been nothing more than a stand-in, a useful placeholder for a truth Evelyn never had the courage to tell. I thought about confronting Ethan, but how do you walk up to the person you raised and say, "You're not mine, I didn't want to destroy him"? But I was already being destroyed piece by piece. My illness was progressing. The doctors had started using the word aggressive. But nothing felt more violent than the idea that I might die, and the person I thought I'd leave my legacy to wasn't even mine. The next morning I looked at Evelyn. "I want to know who the father is." Her lips quivered, and then she said a name I hadn't heard in 30 years, Greg Turner. A name I never thought I'd hear again. And suddenly the past I had buried clawed its way to the surface. Greg Turner. That name hit me like a slap from the grave. He was a friend once. More accurately, a drinking buddy during our early 20s. He was charming, reckless, and dangerous in the kind of way women found hard to resist. Evelyn had met him before she met me. Or so I thought. I never knew they had kept in contact after we got serious. Apparently they had. "I never loved him," Evelyn said, eyes glassy. "It was stupid. He came to town, we argued. Then one night I was drunk, angry, and lonely. I looked at her, the woman I'd promised to protect, the woman I'd built a life with. Her voice shook with guilt, but I couldn't find sympathy. Not when she had taken my fatherhood and handed it silently to someone else. "You robbed me," I said quietly. "You didn't just cheat on me, you stole 30 years of truth." Tears welled in her eyes. I was pregnant and terrified. I didn't know who the father was. But you were steady, kind. I couldn't lose you. I convinced myself Ethan was yours. I needed to believe that. "No," I whispered. "You needed me to believe it." My chest ached. I wanted to scream, but my body wouldn't allow it. The cancer had already begun to drain my strength. The coughing fits were worse, and some days I couldn't hold a pen without trembling. But worse than the physical decay was the erosion of trust, of meaning, of everything. Still, I knew I needed to confront the ghost in this equation. I found Greg. Social media made it easy. He lived 2 towns over, divorced twice, ran a used car lot. His profile picture showed a man with thinning hair, a forced smile, and a beer belly. Time had not been kind. I called him. When he answered and I said my name, there was silence. "Didn't expect to hear from you, Tom," he finally muttered. "It's been, what, 30 years? "I know about Ethan," I said. He paused. "So she told you. She didn't have a choice." "I always knew he might be mine," Greg said with irritating calm. "But I figured, why interfere? He had you. He seemed like a good kid. I didn't want to mess that up." I clenched the phone tighter. "You knew all these years," he said. "I figured if she didn't want to tell you, it wasn't my place." I nearly dropped the phone. He had watched me raise his son, watched from afar, silent, cowardly. "Why didn't you tell him?" I demanded. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because it suited you both better if I didn't," he said simply. He hung up. I sat there gasping, a deep weight pressing on my chest. That night I collapsed. Evelyn found me on the bathroom floor, coughing blood. The hospital admitted me immediately. As I lay in the sterile room, I realized something. I didn't just have cancer. I was dying from a 30-year infection called deceit. I stayed in the hospital for 11 days, IVs in my arms, machines chirping and whirring. Nurses came and went, kind and quiet. Evelyn never left my side. She held my hand, wiped my forehead, cried softly when she thought I was asleep. But I wasn't asleep. I was thinking about Ethan. I hadn't told him. He still called me Dad every day, still visited when he could, still sent me articles about new treatments, as if hope could fix what time and truth had broken. He didn't deserve this. None of it was his fault. But how could I die without telling him? How could I leave him with a legacy built on someone else's blood? One morning, after a particularly painful scan, I asked Evelyn to call him. "He deserves the truth," I said, voice hoarse. Evelyn trembled. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "I won't die carrying this secret." When Ethan arrived, he looked worried, tired. "You scared me," he said, sitting by my side, gripping my hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like a man with unfinished business," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "Well, you've always been dramatic." That broke me. I laughed, then cried, then laughed again. "Ethan," I began, "I need to tell you something, and it's going to hurt. But you need to know it wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault." His face changed. He leaned in. I told him everything. The DNA tests, the affair, Greg Turner, the truth I never asked for and the truth I couldn't unlearn. When I finished, he sat in stunned silence. I don't understand," he finally said. "You're not my father." "Not by blood," I said, "but by everything else. I tried to be." He stared at the floor. "You mean my real dad?" "Greg, he knew all this time." I nodded yes, and he stayed away. He stood up, walked across the room, then turned back to me with eyes I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "So, you raised me, paid for my school, taught me how to ride a bike, and you didn't know." "I didn't," I said. "Not until recently." He swallowed hard. "And now that you know, do you still love me?" I broke. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, "More than anything, nothing can change that." He walked back over and hugged me. Not like a man hugging a stranger, but like a son holding on to his father. "I don't care whose blood is in my veins," he said into my shoulder. "You are my dad. You always will be." I held him tighter than my failing strength allowed. Outside, the sun began to rise. Inside, for the first time in weeks, I felt warmth. Even if everything around me had been a lie, this moment was real, and I clung to it like breath. Ethan stayed with me all night after that. We didn't talk much. Sometimes you don't have to. Just being there. His hand in mine, the quiet rhythm of our breath was enough. The storm had come and gone, and all that remained was a fragile kind of peace. But peace doesn't mean there aren't casualties. The next day, Ethan asked if he could meet Greg. I understood. He had questions, a right to know the man whose blood ran through his body. And I wouldn't stand in the way. I gave him the address and warned him gently, "He's not who you hope he'll be." Ethan nodded, serious. "I need to see for myself." He left, and I spent those hours alone, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing things I might never get to say. When he came back that evening, his face was pale. "You were right," he said simply. "He didn't want me," Ethan added after a long pause. "He didn't ask a thing about my life, just said, 'Wow, you turned out okay without me,' like I was nothing, like I reached for his hand again. He didn't pull away. "He's a man who ran," I said. "You're a man who stayed. That's the difference." Ethan smiled sadly. "I told him he had 30 years to step up, and he chose 0. You had 0 reason to, and you gave me 30 years. It was the closest thing to healing I could hope for. But not all wounds get stitched. At home, things between Evelyn and me changed. She tried. I could see it. Cooked my favorite meals, sat beside me while I read, talked about old vacations and laughed too hard at things that weren't funny. But I couldn't go back to who I was with her. Too much had cracked. Trust is a porcelain thing. Once shattered, it never fits the same. One evening I told her gently, "After I'm gone, you should sell the house." She looked up startled. "This is our home." "No," I said. "It was my dream. Yours was something else. It's time we stopped pretending." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do with a broken love is let it lie where it fell. The weeks blurred. My body weakened. More days in bed. Less appetite. Nurses came daily. Ethan visited every other day, reading to me from the books I once read to him, our favorite old crime thrillers now reversed in roles. Then came the moment I dreaded most. My lawyer arrived with my will. I left the house to Ethan. My journals, my books, my name. Evelyn didn't ask for anything, and I didn't leave much for her. But I gave her a letter, 1 line only. Some truths cost too much to carry. When she read it, she didn't cry. She only nodded, folded it quietly, and walked out of the room. It's strange how in the end time slows down just when you wish it would speed up. I could feel my body surrendering. Each breath was shallower, each movement harder. The machines beside my bed beeped in measured rhythm, counting down the final chapter of my life. And yet in those final days I felt more awake than I had in years. Ethan sat by my side every single evening. Sometimes he brought old photographs. Sometimes he brought silence. Both were enough. "Do you wish you'd never found out?" he asked one night, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought about it, long and hard. "No," I said finally, "because truth, even when cruel, frees you. Lies, they keep you prisoner even in paradise." He nodded, not because he agreed, but because he understood. Evelyn came one last time. I saw the weight on her face of 30 years of a choice she never had the courage to undo. "I'm sorry," she whispered, standing at the doorway like a visitor instead of a wife. "I know," I replied, "and I hope for your sake that one day you forgive yourself. But I can't be the one to do it." She didn't cry this time. She only bowed her head and left the room, taking her memories with her. My final night came gently. The nurse dimmed the lights. Ethan pulled a chair closer and held my hand as I had held his when he was a child afraid of thunder. "I'll be okay, Dad," he said softly. "You don't have to hold on for me." "Promise me," I croaked. "Don't live a life of lies. Speak the truth, even when it hurts." He kissed my forehead. "I will." And then I closed my eyes. I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I had faced the lie. I had spoken the truth. I had looked my death in the eye with nothing left to hide. There was no revenge in the end. No rage. Just a quiet acceptance that life is messy, people are flawed, and love, real love, is more than blood. It's in the moments, in the choices, in showing up when no one else does. As the darkness came, I felt Ethan's hand in mine, and I left this world holding on to that one simple truth. He may not have been born my son, but I was always and proudly his father. If you've followed my story to the end, let me offer you something I wish someone had offered me: clarity. We build our lives on stories, love, trust, identity. But sometimes those stories are written in invisible ink. When the truth finally appears, it hurts deeply. But it also reveals who we really are beneath the illusions. If you've been betrayed, know this: the betrayal doesn't define you. Your response does. You can either let it break you or let it refine you. I spent years unknowingly living a lie, but I died living my truth. And that made all the difference. To the parents out there, blood isn't what makes you family. Presence does. Effort does. Love does. And to those carrying secrets, they don't disappear. They wait until one day they destroy what you were trying to protect. So be honest, be kind, and never let the truth arrive too late.